might go far. Because home.
Okay, so for today's video, I'm going to be introducing how to draw the eye and the nose. And I'm going to go step by step on how to draw the figure and then shade it. Alright. So for today, I'm going to be showing you how to draw the eyes and nose step by step, as I said in the intro. And we're going to shade and make it look as realistic as possible. So we're going to start with the eyes first. So you always want to make sure that you have a good oval shape, because eyes, most time people think that eyes aren't as oval shaped as they are, and so they tend to draw them more circular than oval. And so you want to start out the eye looking more oval shaped than circle shaped to give it that more natural looking feel. And then what I like to do is I like to make sure that the shape is as accurate as possible, and I do that by outlining every detail and then going over it as much as possible until it looks correct. And then I like to shade out the tear duct, so then we get that nice look of a tear duct and a shaded out tear duct. So that's what I like to do first, and sometimes it doesn't always look right, so I always tend to go back and erase it because it might be too big or too small, and I just adjust it to according to what I think is right. Okay, now from here, the eye has a bunch of properties that are important, because if you don't get one of them right, then it's just going to look all wrong. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to give the underlid, the bottom lid, a lip, because the top lid you can't see the lip, but on the bottom lid you can see this thin lip right here, and that's always important to have, otherwise it won't look natural when you start adding eyelashes. So we gave it a lip, and now after that I usually start drawing the iris, and depending on what kind of expression you want to give your eye, it could be half of the iris or it could be like a whole of the iris, but typically people just draw the full iris and they kind of just edit it based on what they want to do later on. So I'm just gonna draw probably like half of an iris. I'm gonna make it half by making the top lid just kind of be a little bit lower, and then I'm just gonna erase that other part that I didn't need. So that's the kind of beginning part of a drawing of the eye. Now you're gonna add the pupil, and again it just depends on whether or not your expression is like more wide-eyed or like kind of sloped. But if it's more sloped, you usually tend to have less of a pupil than if it's wide-eyed. But since this is more of a sloped eye, we're going to make the pupil kind of cut off a little more than 3/4 of the way, like that. Alright, and then from here we're going to fill in the pupil and kind of just give it some, let's see, volume. And this is what we can do from here. We can give it a bit of a highlight where we leave some of the eye kind of just white. It gives off the impression that there's some sort of reflective light in the eye, or we can just fill the whole eye in with color or just plain pencil and make the eye look more realistic. And depending on what kind of light you're giving off your full person, your eye could either be very reflective or not reflective at all, and the whole eye could just be the iris. So I'm going to show you today how to do an iris that is non-reflective. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind for that sort of eye. So what you're going to do is you're going to kind of fill out the edges and make it more profound. And then from there, you're going to start with these sort of lines coming from the pupil. So I like to do kind of like these bended lines to make it look more 3D. Typically, people tend to do that and it makes it more 3D, but some like to do it straight. It kind of just depends on if you're giving it more of a 3D or non-3D vibe. And then around those curled edges that I did, I put kind of this squiggly line because in eyes they tend to have like this sort of break between the inner color of your eye and the outer color of your eye. And so that's what I'm doing here. So from the outer part of the eye, this is where we kind of match up some lines, and these are more straight than the inner lines. And you just start drawing those just kind of randomly at random. And then we kind of just go and fill it out. So let's see, just make it more thin. You can do thin and thick lines. It kind of gives it more profound volume depending on the thickness and the thinness of your lines. And then I like to go and I like to fill in some of the spaces before I color the whole thing in, to again just give it some volume. And after I fill it in, I'm just gonna go and lightly color the eye with a pencil, and that's gonna give off the illusion that there's color in the eye. And again, like when I was talking about light and how it affects the eye, the closer the eye is to something that's like a light source, the more of the eye that's going to be exposed to light, so the lighter the eye color or eye will be. The more of the eye that's going to be exposed to light, so the lighter the eye color or eye will be, and there's going to be reflections. So for part of the eye it's going to be darker, and for the other part of the eye it's going to be lighter just because of light reflections. That makes it seem more realistic. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do that now. Okay, I've filled in the eye now. It doesn't look very realistic at this point, and that's because a lot of the lines that we did before are mostly covered. So we want to go back in and kind of underline some of those lines so that we can make sure that those lines are still pretty profound. And I like to do this with the sharpest point of the pencil, because if you don't, it'll be more thin and light. Because of the most part that you use of a pencil, it will just not really work. And sometimes I go a little too dark, so I kind of have to come in and dab the paper with an eraser to lighten the eye a little bit. And I do that more often than not, so it doesn't happen instantly. It does take a lot of time to kind of just adjust and make the eye look the way you want it. So a piece of advice that I would give is for the pupil, it can never ever be lighter than the rest of the eye, because if it is, then you won't be able to see the pupil, and the pupil is the darkest part of the eye most times. So we have to make sure that the eye is always, like the eye color is always lighter than the pupil itself, otherwise it will just look wrong. or you won't even be able to see the pupil at all. So that's something I was trying to fix just a second ago. Okay, let's see. Now that we've kind of got the eye filled in, this is a lot easier with color, but I just wanted to show you it with pencil, just because that's the first thing you're probably going to use. And I take it back, I'm probably going to go in and put in a reflection because the eye itself right now is super dark, and typically when you work with just lead pencil, your eye's going to come out really dark and you won't be able to see the pupil. And I like to put reflections by the eye's pupil to really accent that the pupil is there. So I just added a little circle reflection because typically that's the most used reflection, or it's usually circles or squares or rectangles that are used for reflections in the eye. Okay, so now that we've done the color and the pupil, we're gonna shade around the eye, and I accidentally took the color part of the eye to past the underlid, so we need to fix that. Alright, that's more exaggerated, but that's kind of what we want it for now so we don't forget about it. Alright, so we're just gonna, we also want to outline the eye as much as possible, like the colored part of the eye, so that when we shade, it doesn't look like it's a part of the eye, the colored part anyway, because otherwise that'll just come off as wrong, or not even just normal. Alright, now that we've shaded and done the eye, we're going to put in some lashes. So I made it very sloped for this one, just to kind of give the impression that the eye is angry, like the person is angry, because each feature on the face is really important when it comes to expression. And if you don't do it correctly, then your face will look like 3 different expressions, because each feature of the face you drew to be a different expression. So you want to always make sure that you're coordinating every expression to the attitude that you want. So I'm kind of making this person kind of angry because of the sloped eye. So I'm gonna kind of give off the eyelashes that more pointed idea. And when it comes to eyelashes, it can't be just like right on the line. It has to kind of just slope under the eye, because that's how eyelashes look. If you look front on at a picture, or like yourself in the mirror, you're going to see that your eyelashes are coming from under the eyelid and then curling back on top. So something I'm doing right now that is typically a mistake that people make is they make really thick eyelashes. We don't want that. We want more thin eyelashes, because thicker will kind of come across as fake. So we want to show realness by making it nice and thin and just very swooped up, because people also tend to make it like kind of stick straight, and that will look just wrong and kind of emotionless. And we want to give as much emotion in a picture as possible, because if we don't, it'll just be kind of dull and boring to look at. So about halfway, I like to switch directions, because obviously eyelashes don't all go in one direction. And another thing I like to do that's really important is to, if you're drawing one eyelash by itself, come in and take another eyelash, kind of triangling the bottom, so then you see this kind of little triangle at the most exposed areas. And that will give the feel that two eyelashes are kind of intertwining with each other. And that happens a lot when, like, typically women put on mascara and two eyelashes kind of come together, and that's the kind of look that we want. Alright, so that's kind of it for the top part of the eye. And now that I'm looking at it from a little bit far away, I think that I drew the eye itself, like the color, a little too big. So I'm gonna change it so it's a little bit smaller and more accurate. Sorry for those that did exactly what I did, because anyway. And I'm just gonna fix the shading. That usually typically happens, and you always end up like readjusting and redoing some things because nothing's perfect immediately. Alright, so now to the under eyelid. So this crease that we did at the very beginning, the eyelashes are gonna come right from that crease, and they're going to just flare out. And what I was saying about the triangle formation, when you put two eyelashes together, you're going to do the same at the bottom, because that just looks natural and normal. And that's something that a lot of artists like to do, because typically if you don't do that, it'll just look like a bunch of singular eyelashes by themselves, and that just doesn't look right. But you do want to have a couple that are kind of by themselves, otherwise it looks all the same, and we don't want everything to be uniform. And again, kind of halfway or like 2/3 of the way, I like to switch directions so it looks natural. And I don't come all the way to the end, because obviously there aren't eyelashes growing out of your tear ducts. That would be weird. And now that we have the full eye with its eyelashes, I like to go back on top and add a crease, because typically people like to accent their eyes by giving a crease on top to kind of show the how the eye isn't just like an oval. The eye outside of the frame of the eye is really a circle, and we like to accentuate that by putting a more profound kind of bulge, it seems, on the top to make it seem more 3D as well. Okay, now that we've done this sort of line here, we're gonna come in and shade. So keep in mind, eyes obviously are right next to... Okay, so funny story. My phone just barely fell down and it shattered, but it's fine. We're just gonna continue the video. I'm gonna show you how to finish shading, and then we're going to draw eyebrows right after to complete the eye look. Alright, so right now I'm just shading the eyelid bulge to make it more 3D. And right after I finish doing that, I'm going to start with the eyebrow. It's important to kind of start the eyebrow like top of the ridge of the nose, like a little bit above that. And what people tend to do is they like to do like shapes, like rectangular shapes, but instead I like to just kind of guess, because eyebrows aren't that perfect. They're not completely boxed out unless you make them that way with makeup. And so I like to just kind of be a little wild with eyebrows, and I do this undertone first with a bunch of little eyebrows first, and then later I like to go over it back in a darker side of the pencil and kind of give it texture. This makes it look more real instead of just like a bunch of lines. It gives it more of a flowy vibe instead of just a bunch of random lines. So I've done the bottom part, and now I'm going to go over the top with darker lines. And it's not going to be as many, it's just going to be like a few. to just kind of texture it out. And then I'm gonna kind of take a couple from here. Just gonna erase it a little bit. All right, now that we have the eyebrow, I like to go and shade all the way up to the eyebrow. And I almost think of it as like, kind of like eyeshadow in a way, where it covers the eye line from the lid to the eyebrow. And that's kind of just a fun way for me to remember how to shade. But for others, it doesn't really necessarily mean you have to think of it as eyeshadow. That's just something I do. So I finished shading that in, and I've got that finished. And sometimes I just go back and add a little bit more so it looks more real. And then I come here under the eye and I finish kind of giving it that texture. So obviously people get tired, so I like to put kind of lines underneath to show that, oh, this person, not only are they angry, but they're also tired. And because no person is perfect, which means no person has completely unlined eyes. So I like to take the shadow I started on the top and kind of bring it around. And then I take the dark, I make the bottom part darker just because a lot of the eye is kind of covering the bottom. And so then I go back and I kind of do like darker lines to underline. And then I finish shading the under eyelid. And that is how I draw eyes. Obviously, it kind of just takes time to get really good. I'm not even at the best point there can be yet. But with practice and with time and with dedication, you can achieve anything you want. And that can include being like the best eye drawer in the world. Or it can be anything else. So, that is my tutorial on how to draw an eye. And I'm going to continue with how to draw noses. Okay, so now we're going to work on noses. Noses can be a little bit difficult, and usually it's the hardest facial feature for people to kind of figure out. So I'm going to show you step by step how to kind of draw a simple nose without, trying to lose your mind. So what I like to do is I kind of like to start with 3 circles. So one is the kind of outer, one is the middle, and one is the other outer. And something that I really, really like is this book called Morpho, and it demonstrates how to draw different facial features. So there's this page on the nose if you really struggle with the nose, or there's a lot about just the face and different angles, or the back, or really anything. There's a lot in here, especially hands. Hands are something I really struggle with, and this Morpho book is a really good reference for all those features. And I'll have a link in the description below on where to get that book. Alright, so after these 3 circles, I like to kind of shape it out a bit and start the formation of the nose. So I kind of come and put the outline on the nose, and just mostly I just shape it like that. And then after I've done that, I kind of like to erase the 3 circles from the top, just so I can see what I'm gonna do next. So usually after this highlight has happened, I go back in and I start with the nostrils. And it depends on what angle you're looking from, but nostrils can be different depending on what angle the nose is being seen from, and that's literally the worst drawing ever. Hold on, let me fix that. You want the nostrils to look correct on proportion based on where they're being seen from, because otherwise it'll look not good, and you don't want it to look bad. So I just kind of messed up just barely because I didn't make the nostrils as big as I was supposed to, and now I'm struggling. So I'm just gonna erase that. I'm gonna start over really quick. And that's okay. Like, in art, nothing's perfect, and you can't always get stuff done first try. So sometimes it just takes a few shots till you get it right. I'm over exaggerating this time because I really need it bigger so I can see what I'm doing. And I can say that I've definitely gone back and redone a section on a face over and over again. In fact, an example I want to show you is a drawing I did earlier this week. This drawing took me the longest time, especially with the nose and the shading. And I'm just gonna say now, I probably erased the same spot about 5 different times until I finally felt okay with it. And sometimes your drawing's not gonna be exactly perfect, but it will end up being what you think is exceptional and what you think is the best when it comes to your art. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. All right, and then we're gonna come back to this. So I'm kind of showing you a view nose. That's what I'm kind of drawing right now. And so I'm just gonna bring the nostrils out a little bit because kind of a little bit hidden. And it definitely takes a lot of reshaping till you get the shape that you like. Because obviously you can't just draw something immediately the first try correctly. So it definitely takes time, and it definitely takes a lot of redrawing and drawing over and over again until you get the desired outcome. Alright, so now that I've kind of got this nostril going on here, I'm going to come and connect it to the top part of the nose tip and fix it according to proportion. And that is the first part done right there. Now, it's not perfect right now, but honestly, nothing looks truly amazing to me until I'm done shading. And that's why I love the shading process, because it really just gives the picture like a full definition, and it makes it completely different from what you started out with originally. Okay, so now I'm working on the bridge line of the nose, and this is something I always do. I always kind of just draw a line up first, because I eventually come in and erase the parts that I don't like and make it suggested instead of prominent. And by that I mean you can assume it's there based on the stuff that it's around. So if it's around like an eye, then it's suggested because obviously you can't have a nose without your eye over here in the corner. I'm not going to draw a full eye, I'm just going to draw a quick demo eye so we can have something to bounce it off of. This is where the shading around the eye comes really in handy, because it not only makes the eye really pop, it also gives the suggestion that the nose is there. Instead of this whole big line that I drew earlier, it kind of makes it look ugly. So after you've kind of given yourself a bridge line, I like to come up and kind of shade in this area so it's not so flat and it looks more like real, like more 3D. And I do that by kind of shading the top part of the nose. And then after I shade that, I kind of come in and shade around the side parts. It's a weird process. You can really do it any way you want, in any order, but this is just how I do it. And then, let's see. So I'm gonna kind of make it seem like there's light reflecting off of the bottom. So then there's kind of more like a shadow on top of the nose, like a light shadow right there. So then it kind of seems like it's more 3D with the shadow. And sometimes if I have kind of like two shadows overlapping, I go back and I shade in the other shadow a lot more so you can see it better. And you can tell that that region in the drawing is a lot darker than the other shadow that I drew. Alright, and then after this point, I kind of go and I decide, okay, well, what part of the nose is getting the most light? And I kind of draw a line in half. And oh, something else that I do is I like to shadow the kind of the part of the nose that's closer down to the lip, like that. And then I'll shadow underneath the nostril, so it seems like there's a shadow right under the nose. That makes it more 3D as well. And I'll tell you how to draw kind of the bottom part of the lip as seen in this drawing. I'm going to show you how to do this after I finish the nose. Alright, so here we go. Okay. So from here, I'm just going to decide, well, I think this side is more dark than this side. And because I think that, I'm going to make this side more shaded than the other. The other side is probably going to be more like a lighter shade, while this is going to be more dark. And if you can see what I'm doing right here is I'm shading this in a more like horizontal line to, again, give it that 3D feel. And by doing that, it just makes it seem like it's a rounder object. So I'm going to slowly make this line more horizontal as I get closer to the edge. Then I'm gonna tip it over a little bit, and I'm gonna make each like line of shading even lighter than the last, so it seems like there's more light on this side of the nose. Alright, let's see. So some things I like to do to make things seem more like smooth instead of kind of rigidy like this. Something I did in this picture, I like to like kind of just get my finger a little bit wet, and I like to spread around some of the lead, and that makes it look really just smooth. And that's just something I like to do, because instead of like an eraser, there's like some erasers that you can get that are like, that'll smooth out a drawing for you instead of erasing them. I just use my finger, and that works just as good. And everyone has fingers, so you can do it too. So that's just something I do to make it more smooth. And which is actually, it's actually something I do often too now that I think about it. Okay, so now that the nose is kind of smoothed out and really just shaded in well, I'm gonna take the under part of the nose and I'm gonna shade that. So what I do from here is I kind of take these two lines from the nostrils, like the end of the nostrils, and I draw them like that. And this is gonna kind of cut into a introduction to lips, because lips are connected to that part. Like the tips of lips are typically connected to the lines that are coming from the nostrils. And lips are a little different, but they're mostly circles, actually, so they're not incredibly hard. I can do a video on that too if it's requested. But that's kind of the basic thing for lips. I just need to draw a basic outline so I can explain this kind of thing up here. It's connected to the nose. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to kind of shadow in this. Again, like this is the most important thing with shading. It just makes drawings look 3D. And without shading, your drawing either A, looks pretty flat, or it just doesn't look very realistic. And when you're drawing, it's usually the intent that your intent is usually to just make it as super realistic as possible, unless that's not your style, but it kind of depends. Most artists like to make things really realistic. So I do this kind of, this kind of reminds me of like the Roman numeral 2, just because of like the space I leave in between and the places I shade. It's like that. It's just, it looks like the Roman numeral 2. So from there, that's usually the most I do with that sort of shading. And that's typically it. And then from there, I work on the lips, which I can do if requested, as I said earlier. So that's pretty much it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed the tutorial, and leave a like if you would like to see more in the future.